once again, as a bit of a fork off of this video, I'll show you how to create a little bit more refined of a schematic design. So this study model is now turning into a schematic design model. And with the help of a few plugins, creating things like this is actually surprisingly easy. And you can see it's a very much more informative model in terms of what is happening here in terms of pathways and bridges and whatnot. So what I'll do is I'll show you how I drew this up in AutoCAD and give you a couple of suggestions of how I might be able to do it in SketchUp if I wanted to stay in that ecosystem. But I'm all about jumping around as much as possible for good reasons, not just to waste time, but to really leverage the tools and the plugins that are available to you. A really nice thing about this overall workflow, if you've been following it as I've outlined, is at this point you could take this study model and continue to do schematic design and design development right in SketchUp. Or you could go to a plan view and export it to Illustrator, or you could go back to AutoCAD or something completely different. And I'm all about interoperability and keeping this process in perspective. So these different options are very apparent and hopefully easy to do. So what I'll do now is I'll show you how I would initiate that process in both SketchUp and AutoCAD, but then I'll continue along in AutoCAD just for the sake of time. Now in SketchUp, it's really great at 3D, but it's also really tricky to design in 3D. And I recommend designing in 2D and then putting it in 3D as a final step, especially with landscape and organic shapes. And here's what I like to do. So what I'm going to do is grab the select tool and I'll edit this transect, grab that bottom edge which represents the extent of my model, and I'll copy it. Then I'll exit out by clicking in white space. Now what I'll do is I will paste in place. You'll see I do that quite a lot, which places it below. Here's another reason why you want to kind of always keep things in groups, because I know that this model is made up of a bunch of well-organized groups, so that paste in place will not intersect or interfere with any model elements. Now with the move tool, I can move this in the blue direction, being very careful that it stays in the blue direction. And I'll just put it up here. That's kind of a fun thing. I can grab the paint bucket, grab a yellow, give it a transparency. Now the Windows version looks a little different, but I think you'll be able to figure it out. And I'll just paint that. So I've effectively just made virtual tracing paper. I'm looking straight down. Notice I don't have X-ray turned on. That's just the transparency of that material. Now the reason you'd want to do it that way rather than just turning on X-ray is any drawing you do at this point will snap to that top surface. So maybe I'm drawing the pathway here. It does that, and then maybe the pathway goes over here. And unless you're really comfortable with SketchUp, that inferencing can kind of start to get a little weird. Now there are tons and tons of really great plugins. One of them is the BZ toolbar, so you can draw all kinds of less constrained shapes. So I would recommend checking that out. And the ecosystem is constantly changing, but there's one of three places you'll always find these great plugins. One is the extension warehouse, one is at smustard.com, one is at sketchucation.com, and Sketchucation even has their own toolbar. So rather than show you how to find that, I would recommend just Google BZ toolbar if you would like to find that. But this type of setup, again, it's like a tracing paper technique, and you could do your entire design this way if you would like. You could even do this. I can take this shape that I just created and I'm going to make it a component, and I'll set my component axes to be like this, right at that corner. And look where the red line and the green line are going. And we'll just call this study work in progress. And create. Then I can right click and select Save As. And it has that same name. Do a save. And then I could open it up separately. And notice now if I go to a top-down view, it's not at an angle. And any drawing or any modification I do to this will be not automatically saved, but easily swappable. So you get the idea. I could continue to draw on this in 2D, save it, and then come back here, right click on that, reload, navigate to that file, and you'll see it swap out. I'll show you that again in a little bit, but I just want to share with you this tracing paper technique. But I tend to like to do 2D drawing in AutoCAD. It just works better. And I reopened up the exact same file that I was working on in this video here right before I exported it, saved and exported it over to create that topographic model. And I'll set this thing up too. Now, it's a little bit different process, but typically what I would do is I'd create a new layer, and when in doubt, just call it something, you know, sketch whip for work in progress. And then I'll make that the default layer by clicking on it here, which is a slightly different convention than what I would do in SketchUp, where I tend to always draw in layer 0, group things, and then assign those groups to layers. And I've talked to literally probably hundreds of people who share that same convention idea. Okay, the other thing I noticed as I reopen this up is that it's missing that image. If you ever happen to see that, here's a really easy fix. Just type xref, hit enter, and you'll see here the references that are not found. If you load up the details pane at the bottom, and depending on your version of AutoCAD, it might have a browse button. This one has a link over to the very right edge, right there, that dot, dot, dot. And that allows me to relocate it. I can navigate to it here, open it up, and now it's back. So all is good. Just wanted to share that. But back to how I would set this up. So I've created my own new layer. I would then turn off or freeze or lock, or any combination, I guess. Let's lock them first. The other layers, just so I don't inadvertently activate or derive shapes from them. Now, this image is a little bit much. Let me take down the transparency of that. That layer is right here, and there is a transparency setting that's kind of hidden. Sometimes you have to scroll over. I'll set that to 80, and that is much lighter. At this point, I'm really just tracing on top of this. So let's drag that back. I'm in my sketch whip layer, and I'm going to give that a yellow color to make it easier to see. All right, now notice too that my UCS is kind of set at a weird angle. Again, it's actually the default angle, but a little bit of review. You can type UCS and create a new coordinate system. Now I'll do a shift right click to bring up the snaps. And that didn't work. Let's try that again. UCS, enter. I'll just turn on my snaps. How about? Let's do that. This is a new version of AutoCAD from the last time I was doing a video, so it may or may not work out as I expected. Now I'm typing NEA to, on the fly, locate the nearest snap, just because I don't have that as a setting. My near, which is right here, is off by default. But anyway, I've got my UCS set up. That just makes it a little bit easier to draw. I can re-navigate and reorient with my little window up here. I've got my sketch whip set up, so I'm just going to start by drawing a rectangle that covers the extents of my drawing. Now, another nice thing about working in multiple programs here, as you work with more and more CAD files, you will be able to look at contours and know what's going on. You will recognize ridge lines and valleys and drainage locations and directions and etc. But it's also nice to have a SketchUp model that shows the same area because it's easier to get down in here and really understand what's going on. And you know, it's a pick your poison kind of thing. Some people prefer one over the other. I always like to go back and forth. But here I can see there's a little bit of a ridge right there. It's kind of a flat ridge, but that might make more sense to have a pathway follow that to come down to this area. And on this side, the topography obviously ramps up really quick on right around here. So I would probably want a pathway to be closer to that. Another thing, I don't really want to accidentally snap to one of these contours, and once I've got a pretty good sense of where they are situated, it would probably make sense to freeze those layers. And the difference between freezing and turning the light bulb on and off is if they are frozen, they are not going to affect any part of your model. That's my vegetation. I want my aerial. There we go. Whereas if it's just off with the light bulb, you may still accidentally select it. So just keep that in mind. All right, so let's draw some really quick contours, and not contours, pathways. Don't judge my design here, but for example, I could do a polyline, P-L-I-N-E, and I always like to start it somewhere close to an edge. So I'll type N-E-A, hit enter to bring up the near snap, and I could just click and trace this, but you know, I'm going to propose a new pathway just to be a little bit different here, and I'll make it kind of zigzaggy, and I'll go off the edge. It's okay to go off the edge, and I'll hit escape when I'm done. You will probably wear off the escape key on your keyboard when you work a lot in AutoCAD. And I'm just going through a few of how I would do this, a few steps how I would do this. So I'll load up offset, and then I will type 10, enter, click on that polyline once, and notice I can go to either side. I want to offset it this direction to the right. There we go. So now that's offset. There's my new path. Let's draw one over here. There is a path, but that's on the golf course. So again, we'll just assume there's going to be another pedestrian pathway over here, and taking some liberties because in reality there might not. But I want to show you a nice thing about the polyline. I'll start my polyline again, and I'm still in my offset, so I have to hit escape a bunch of times. Let's do P-L-I-N-E, and this time I'm going to start a little cheater line out here, and you'll see why in a moment. So I'm just going to draw a straight line, and I'm still in the polyline. It's doing the rubber banding effect. But a nice thing about the polyline, as any tools in AutoCAD, always keep an eye on your command line, because you will see all kinds of neat additional tools. And the polyline has an arc option. So what does that mean? Well, if I'm out here, I can type A and hit enter, and now that turns into an arc that is being drawn tangent from the little cheater line that I created. And the really nice thing about the arc tool with the polyline is once it's loaded up, it continues to draw tangent arcs. So notice that these lines are all tangent from one another. And then again, I'll hit escape to stop. So you get these nice flowing curves. And just for the sake of doing something different, I'll do the Moorhead, Minnesota side, I'll curvy, and the North Dakota side, I'll jaggedy. Once again, I'll type offset, hit enter to register that 10 unit distance, and there we go. So now I've got myself a path on the North Dakota side, a path on the Minnesota side. And where should my bridge go? Well, I'll start by drawing the bridge, and then I'll just fill in the gaps. So let's do a polyline again. And hit escape, P-L-I-N-E. You have to be careful. Sometimes you'll be stuck in a command and not even really realize it. And I'll start my polyline here, and this is going to represent the distance of my bridge. And keep in mind, this is very much still just sketching. It's schematic design. There is plenty of time down the road to get into construction documents, but this is the fun part of the design process. So, alright, how about that's going to end up like right about there. And I could connect this like that and connect it back up like that. But I'm going to undo because I just want to draw the one line first to represent the bridge. This could be the center line, it could be an edge. I'm just doing schematic, so we'll just consider it an edge and we'll connect the rest of the pieces. Alright, so let's do polyline again. This time I will select the end point, and once again I'll hit A, enter. And look at that, a nice tangent arc from that last point. So maybe this curves over here and then curves back up, and I'm intentionally going to overlap it, and you'll see why here, because we'll do trim in a moment. If you worry too much about these lining up perfectly right away, you're going to have a bad time. So don't do that. I always get used to drawing and then erasing things. Let's do the North Dakota side. P line again. And I'll draw, and I think I might run into a problem here. Let's see what happens. I'm rubber banding, hit A, enter. Ooh, look at that. That's not what I wanted at all for that arc. Why is this one not drawing tangent from that edge? Well, it has to do with the direction of this polyline here. So here's a situation where you would want to do a polyline edit, P-E-D-I-T, polyline edit, enter, select the polyline, and then either hit R on your keyboard or navigate to the reverse option. I have my dynamic input turned on. That's that icon there. If you're on 2014, you'll probably see it over here somewhere. But let's do a reverse, and let's see what happens now. Polyline, end, whoops, polyline there. Come over here, hit A, enter. Oh, and it's still not working. Okay, well, that's sometimes it's reversed, sometimes it's not. But hey, we're on the North Dakota side where this is going to be jagged anyway, so I'll just do my jaggedy. And remember, this is that ridge that I kind of wanted to be able to draw from. All right, so I've got my North Dakota side that's all jaggedy that connects up to this curvy Minnesota side. And what I've got here is kind of a hodgepodge of polylines. Sometimes, especially if you're about to do an offset, it is better to join these. So you'll be doing polyline edits and explodes quite a lot. And explode will just essentially do what it sounds like. It takes your multiple lines and makes them separate. But once again, polyline edit. And this time I'll type M to load up the multiple option, enter, and click, click, click. Hit enter, and then I will select join. And then hit enter a few times to register. Hit escape to boot yourself out of that command. Click on that to verify that it is in fact selected. So maybe I want this to be a center line. Well, there are some Lisps, and there's probably even a built-in command, but here's kind of an old school way to do this. Maybe this is a 12-foot wide. Well, that just means I would need to do offset and then type 6, enter. Click here, go to that side. Right click again, click here, there. Whoops, let's see, my right click didn't work. So I'm going to hit escape, offset, enter, because I've still got 6 loaded up. Center line, there we go. Now I can just click on that center one and hit delete on my keyboard. There we go. So that's a way to kind of treat it as a center line. And now is probably a good time to clean this up with a trim. TR, enter to load up trim. I'll just select everything, hit enter, and I would recommend working from the outside in. And you'll end up with a few stragglers like those pieces up there that we'll take care of here in a moment. You can draw boxes. You can click right on them, and I'll get rid of that one, working my way out in. I'll go to the other side. Now I'll do this one wrong. I will save those for the last to show you why you want to work from the outside in, because if you end up with this kind of situation, AutoCAD no longer has anything to trim to or from. So if you run into that, just hit escape, click on it and hit delete, click on it and hit delete. And there's a couple guys up here that you can grab and hit delete. So there we go. It's coming together. The bridge is conceptually a different type of design process for how I'm going to be showing you. So now would be a good idea to define the starting edge and the ending edge. And think of this, the path is something that's permanent. The bridge potentially, especially here, is something that would probably be removed. Maybe it's the type of thing that needs to be hoisted up into the air, or it's a floating bridge like over by the farmer's market. But there's definitely a hard edge. So I will load up my polyline again, P-L-I-N-E, and I'll start with an NEA, which is for near, and then I'll type PER for perpendicular, and that will draw me a line perpendicular. Really important that you'll see why. You don't want to just eye this, just trust me. And that's why it's nice to load up those commands on the fly, because near and perpendicular are honestly not very common snaps that you would use very much. So I like to type them in. They've all got fairly conventional and, as you would expect, shortcut 3-character combinations. But you've also got the shift right click. Let's do that on this side. Polyline. Whoops, I typed NEA out of force of habit, so let's do that again. Polyline. I will shift right click, and now I can select nearest. And I don't know why it's snapping back to that. I don't want that, so let's hit escape. Let's do it my way. NEA, nearest right about here, and then PER for perpendicular to there. Hit escape. So that gives me a perfectly rectangular area represented by those starting and ending points. And you'll see why that's important when I go back to SketchUp here in a moment. So let's see, what else would we want to maybe change on this? Well, you know, in reality, these paths wouldn't be that hard edged. There'd probably be a radius. If someone's cruising through here on a bike or on inline skates, they probably don't want to do too sharp of a turn. Now, there's all kinds of ways to do it. You could do it with the arc tool and just kind of eye it, but I like to use chamfer, fillet, just F. You don't have to spell out the whole thing. And right away, again, keep an eye on your options. I'll load up the radius by doing R, enter, and I'll try 20. Let's see how 20 works. Enter. Now I need to pick my first and my second object. So I'll click here, and then I'll click here. So that one worked out. If it ever looks kind of funky, you might have too big of a radius, so just keep that in mind. I'll right click to bring up that tool once again. Oh, like this. See how it's now kind of doing a weird thing in the preview. I don't want it to snap back like that. So that might be a radius thing. It might be where I clicked. Let me hit escape. Right click to bring it up again. And look at that. I think it has something to do with this. These are two separate polylines. So let's try this one. And that one. That one's still messed up. Hit escape, right click, that one. Nope, that's not going to work. So here's a situation where I would explode this polyline to make it multiple polylines. Let's see if that helps us out. Type explode, hit enter, click on that polyline, hit enter. Now that's an arc, and that's a polyline, etc. Let's try fillet again. First object, second object. Well, that's no good. Let's explode this guy and try it one more time. There we go. Now it works. Just had to do a combination of a few exploding, and we can rejoin these later. And honestly, when you go to SketchUp, it doesn't remember if it's joined or not. On this side, we'll just leave it as it is. And you could do this as much as you want for this drawing. And we could create other areas, landing areas, stairway areas, whatever. But for this example, this is all the further I want to go. And this part's kind of neat. Now, I'm going to reset my coordinate system over here. I can't get my spotlight to show up in the right spot. That's no fun. So over here, just look for my moving cursor. And I can reset that by clicking here and selecting WCS for World Coordinate System. Now I'll turn off my aerial by freezing it, and I'll do a right block. W block, select these objects, and you might remember this as the exact same way we brought over the contours from this way. Or similar, I should say. Maybe not exactly the same. And I kind of got a little disoriented there. And I want my base point to be the same. So I'm not going to select my base point. And I'm going to give this a name of SD for schematic design. How about SD bridge? And very important, you have to hit that dot 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 and make sure it's set to AutoCAD 2010 or earlier to make sure you can import it into SketchUp. Hit save, hit OK. Back to SketchUp. Again, here's one way. I could have drawn that exact same thing or pretty darn close using this tracing paper method, but I'm going to delete that because I'm going to import that CAD drawing that I just created. There it is. Hit import. And because we've been really careful, except for right now when I was moving that around, but look where it imported it. It imported it in the exact same position. If yours did not, there might be a scale issue, or there might be a situation where this got moved somewhere in the design process. But if you followed my steps really carefully, it should line up in the same spot. Worst case scenario, you just need to manually align it. But look at this. If I go to a top-down view, I can see that that aligns perfectly. So we could, at this point, use some of the built-in Sandbox tools. And I'll give you a really quick overview of how those work. They're accessible from the View tool palettes, and just look for Sandbox. And let me jump over to this one here. And it's a file I've already been working on. Let me erase that. Let's get rid of a few things here. And what I've got in this drawing now is some topography at the bottom and a 2D flat drawing up here. So a very simplification, oversimplification perhaps, of what I was just working on. And I'm going to make a copy over here. And the reason for this is just to show you how the Sandbox tools work. I'll do the first one, which is stamp. And it takes a footprint such as this and stamps it onto the topography below. So do you see what happened there? It has an offset and it just stitched it together. And on this one, let me make a copy because I'll do this a couple times. The neat thing is it doesn't even need to be on the same plane. So this one, I'm going to move that down. I'll take this plane here, and notice now that plane is at a different angle than what it was before. But I can take the stamp tool. Look at that red line. That is my offset. I'm going to type, how about 5 feet, enter, and my offset just got smaller. That is the area, essentially the shoulder, that is stitched away on the topography down below. So there is another example of that. On this one, I will do the drape tool. That is the next one over. The drape tool takes shapes and just, they fall down, and wherever they land, they land. So that's about as quick of an overview of the Sandbox tools as I can show you. There are a bunch of plugins out there that work a little bit better. The Artisan tool set is wonderful. I'd recommend looking at that. Subdivision and sculpting, really cool stuff. Costs money, but definitely worth it. I've talked about that BZ toolbar. That is another set of tools I'd recommend. But the one I want to show you is created by the Valley Architects, an operation based out of Hawaii, and the gentleman who created this has written some really brilliant plugins called Instant Road, Instant Roof, Instant Site Grader, etc. And the two I'll be showing you, or more so the one, I'm just going to work with Instant Road. There's Instant Road and there's Instant Road NUI. If you have 2014, you have to use NUI. you can only use the Instant Road with 2013. And there's a free version of Instant Road. That's the one I'm going to show you. I do have the pay for version. Definitely worth it. Even if your time is worth minimum wage, you will get your money's worth out of the Instant Road Newie. So I'd recommend that. But for this demonstration, I'll just be using the Instant Road. So what I would recommend if you want to follow along is click on Learn More and download the free version. It downloads a .rbz file. So you will just have to Google how to install an RBZ file, because for the sake of time, I want to jump into how to use it, not how to install it. Once it is installed, you will be able to access it from the plugins menu option, and it's right here, Instant Road. And I'll just be showing you the from faces. It's actually really cool. I'd recommend going through the website and look for the videos. You'll find out some really neat things about it. But there's a couple other setup options, and what I'll do here is I'll move this in the blue direction up. You always want to keep layers in mind, and especially with landscape architecture and site design, you always want to be able to go back to a top-down view and have these things line up like that. So let me just get situated here. I'm going to make a copy of the transect because I don't want to destruct the one that is there. I'll grab the Move tool, and on a Mac it's Option. I think on Windows you want to hit Alt, and I'll make a copy in the blue direction. And I'll turn off my vegetation just to make this a little bit easier to navigate around. Now on this, I need to explode that copy that I just created, and you'll see why here in a moment. And then I'll edit that imported file, because I brought in the site just to be able to align. And I'll show you what I'm going to do here. I'm going to get rid of those extra site edges, and then I'm going to heal a few of these edges. This particular plugin works on faces, not edges, which is a little bit different than the Drape tool, the built-in Sandbox tool. And I'm having trouble drawing lines that connect. There we go. The inferencing is kind of fighting against me. Then what I'll do is I'm going to click on this surface, go to Edit, and make it a group. Then I'll click on the area that would represent my bridge, Edit, Make Group, and the Moorhead side, Edit, Make Group. Then I will exit out of that component, select this nested component now, and I'm going to explode it. And what that really does is it explodes the first shell, which now leaves me those three groups that I just created. And now's a good time to save. I'd recommend you do the same with your model. All right, another really important thing to understand about this plugin is, well, with all plugins, read the manual. Experiment, but also read the manual, and don't get frustrated. One thing about this is the pieces you work with, the path or the faces, have to fall within the extent of the surface you are applying it to. So if I go to a top-down view, notice how this overlaps slightly. Same on this edge, same on those other two edges. So you just need to bring that in a little bit. And keep in mind, we are going to be creating a shoulder that's probably about 3 feet. So I need this to offset 3 feet and then a little bit more as to not affect the edge of this drawing. Easier to show than it is to explain. So what I'll do is I'll take my tape measure tool and I'll create a line that's, oh, how about 6 feet just to be safe. Then I'll take my line tool and connect those points and then erase. I'm going to keep, nah, yeah, we better erase those. And I'll do the same thing over here. Grab the tape measure tool, 6 feet, line tool, clean those edges, erase. I'm just hitting my shortcut keys to bring up these different tools. Now if I go to a top-down view, I can see that those are offset, and that's just how the tool works. So I'll do the same thing over here really quick, and hopefully not explain so much. So this time I'm just going to hit my shortcuts because everyone should know what I'm doing, and I recommend using shortcuts. As you can see, it makes the workload a little bit more manageable. There we go. And I'm going to do two things here just to kind of make this a little bit easier to understand. I'll set my face style to monochromatic, and I'll turn on and off my hidden geometry. That's under View and Hidden Geometry. I have it set to a shortcut, so just know where you need to go to turn that on. So the math behind this really cool plugin is that it's going to take this shape, drop it, flatten it out as best as it can. It's not perfect. It won't grade for you, so it's not going to give you a code compliant grade. That's why, remember when I was seeing this red right here, I was just trying to get close to it for this example. And here's how it works. Let me turn off my hidden geometry. You select the group which represents your face. You hold down Shift and you select the topography that you are going to create a road from. Then you go Plugins, Instant Road, and Road from Faces. The road from Centerline is also really cool, but for the sake of this video and time, I'm going to skip over that. A limitation of the free version is you can only go up to a 3-foot shoulder. Perfectly acceptable, because even for free, this is a wonderful plugin. And I recommend, once again, can't stress enough that it'd be worthwhile to buy the pro version. You will enjoy it. Make curb, I'll go ahead and hit yes. Edit additional, what does that mean? Well, I'll just show you here. If you have that set to yes and then click OK, you are given these additional parameters. So I'll set my subgrade just to be a little different here. I'm going to make a 2-foot subgrade, and you'll see what that means in a moment. Actually, yeah, 2 feet. It's a little high, but we'll just, for the sake of showing you what happens, I'll turn that on. And I'll keep the other settings as default. Hit OK, and then it is going to town here. You should see in the lower left-hand corner the status. Now what's happening is it's kind of a combination of what the built-in Sandbox tools do. It's going to drape it down, create an offset or a shoulder. It'll do a bunch of stitching, and it creates, as best as it can, a flat road that matches up with the contours or topography as well as it can. It's really cool. And while that's working here, let me just tell you too, the Pro version has a whole bunch more settings of controlling the height of the road and adding some other features. So the Pro version, and I'm not getting anything from the Valley Architects, it's just actually that cool of a plugin where I like to talk about it. There we go, it is complete. And I'll turn on my hidden geometry so you can see there is that 3-foot offset or shoulder from there to there. And you can see how the plugin just needs a little bit of extra space on the edge. It's built in a curb. It's actually done a lot of neat things, and it's created somewhat of a flat surface. And I actually followed the ridge pretty good. I'm pretty darn close to it. And it really created a few different plugins here, or groups I should say, not plugins. It's got the curb and it's got the road. And the reason for that is, especially with the Pro version, there are additional queries you can do to find out the cut and the fill and a few other kind of neat details. So that's what happened there. So let's tell you what, let's just go ahead and really quickly do this to the other side. And notice I'm doing this in kind of manageable bites. I don't want to do too much too soon. So let's select the group, hold down Shift, select the topography, plugin, and instant road from face. I'll just do OK. It should keep the same settings as the previous operation. Now, in case you were wondering, I sped mine up considerably through the magic of post-processing, but that took my computer probably 2 minutes to complete. And if yours takes more than 10 minutes, something might be wrong. But this is getting to be somewhat informative now, and how the grading is performed. And it would be nice if we could show this section all the way up to the edge. Now, if you are in a hurry, I would just recommend using the built-in section tool, which looks like this. I can select that section and move it just like I can in geometry. And then you can zoom right on down here and start seeing some kind of informative sections. But if you wanted to clean this up, you could actually do the same method that I've shown before when I cleaned up the edges of these contours. And now, this is a situation where we're going to be a little destructive to the overall intent of this plugin, because there's a reason this is a group. It has metadata embedded in it where you can calculate other things. But in this situation, I'm going to go ahead and explode those. And the reason I am exploding those is because I want to polish up this section so it actually cuts directly through. And we're eating a little bit into our transect. It's no longer 300 feet. It'll probably end up being 290 feet. But I've got them selected, right click, and select explode. Depending on the complexity of your model, this may take a minute or two or more. And now I can do a little cheat here, and I'll regroup this. This will make sense here hopefully in a moment. Make group. Because I want it isolated, then I'm going to grab the circle tool. And the circle tool is nice because it'll orient to whatever face your cursor is on. So I'll just draw a circle roughly in the center. And I'm just going to make it really big so it encompasses the whole group. Then I'll take the push-pull tool, push-pull this edge. This is kind of a little hacky way to do it. There's probably an easier way that I've just never thought about. Then I'm going to select that edge that I just push-pulled, edit and copy. Then I'm going to delete it. Triple click and delete. Now it's gone. Why did I do all that? Well, now I can edit this group and once again paste in place. You'll see lots of reasons why you want to do that. It's isolated from the rest of the model, which is very beautiful. Now I will select everything, right click, and intersect with selection. And as I've mentioned before, you sometimes want to do that a couple times, especially when your model is increasingly sophisticated and complicated, because sometimes the math of the program or the plugin skips a few lines. All right, that one is complete. Let's try it again. Right click, intersect with selection. That should be good. Now I'll erase that outer edge. And remember this trick. If you right click on a face, you can select Align View. Also important that I have parallel projection turned on and not perspective. Now I can zoom in here. And if you're lucky, you should be able to do a right to left box. Don't go too far. And if you're lucky, you'll hit delete and you'll orbit and you'll have a nice face here. But sometimes there's a few issues where you get to play this fun game called Find the Leak, because there's a small problem in here somewhere. All right, so that means all these geometries are good beyond that point. If I draw a line here, oh, that actually healed up pretty good. Sometimes all you just have to do is zigzag your way across and it will fix itself. Oh, here's a problem. All right, we're narrowing in on the culprit. And I would guess it has something to do with this curve. So what I'll do is I'm going to draw a line, a little line there, and erase it. And a little line, I'll break that edge, maybe erase that. And let's see if we can't clean this up. There we go. So there was just a reversed face somewhere in here. So now I can right click, reverse that face, clean this up, and you've got yourself a nice clean edge. I'd probably do the same thing to the other side as well, depending on how much of a perfectionist you are. But if I right click align view, and then I'll pan as to not lose that alignment. There we go. Now we're really getting a kind of neat informative section cut right here. And it's actually a very good section elevation because you can see how this pathway kind of winds down. So very informative, kind of neat. A little bit of cleanup here. I see I got myself a face I could probably heal by connecting some dots. There we go. And this one I'm going to right click and select reverse face. So there you go. That's how you can create some nice pathways using this wonderful free plugin. What about our bridge? Well, I'm going to save that for another video, but let me show you a little heads up. Here's the bridge, and it is a group. Remember when we created those other things, the pathways, we made those groups. Well, what I'm going to do here is right click and make it a component. That's step one. Then I'm going to edit the component, and while I'm editing it, I want to right click and select change axes, because you cannot have axes on just a group. And I'm going to set this axis right aligned with this corner. So I will click once, click over here in the red direction, and then I'll click over here, making sure that blue is up. See that? That's bad. Blue is pointing down. I want blue to be up. Click. There we go. So now that component axis is located exactly on that corner. I'll click in white space. I can even move this down now. Grab my move tool, hit my arrow key, and we'll just snap it right to here. I see one other thing I'm going to fix here in a moment. Actually, hang tight. Just remember where we left off with the bridge. It's very intentional. You know, we probably don't want a biker to come and hit this curb, so here's a really quick fix. I'm going to turn on my hidden geometry, double click to edit this, and look at this line. See how that's connecting that corner to that corner? We'll just swap it, and I'll actually use this little used toolbar or sandbox tool, which is flip vertex. So again, that's under View, Toolbars, Sandbox. And watch what happens to this. This is all about triangulation, where all of these faces are triangulated. Why is it not letting me triangulate that? Let's try this side. Well, that side's already correct. So that tool should have swapped that. You know what? It's not. So what we're going to do this the old-fashioned way of just deleting it. Oh, that's why, because it's not a face. So from here, I'll draw a line from this corner up. And all I really wanted to do there was create a triangulated edge of a ramp. Now I'll draw a line from that corner over here. And then I should be able to draw a line from this corner over here. There we go. See what I just did? I just created a ramp that goes up to that edge there. Grab the eraser tool, hold down the correct modifier key in order to soften those edges. There we go. And I would do the same thing on the other side. So if you're, again, depending on your level of perfectionism, this is still just a schematic drawing. Let me click in white space. Back to our bridge. Here's my little preview for what we'll be doing. If I right click and do a save as, and we'll call this bridge whip. Then I can open that up as a separate drawing. And perhaps the deadline is approaching and you forgot that you needed to finish the bridge. Well, you could come in here and just really quickly do something like this. It's not a very exciting bridge. And maybe, you know what, let's make it slightly more exciting. I'm going to quickly get rid of that. There's the profile for my bridge. I'll select this edge, activate the follow me tool and then click on this path. And you know, it looks pretty good. Save this. Come back here, right click and reload. Because that was derived from this drawing here, it will align perfectly. Or you could even give that to a friend and say, hey, why don't you work on this bridge for me? Swap it out when it's all said and done. So that's a very basic bridge. The next video will show you how to make a much nicer bridge. Oh, and you know what? We had monochromatic on so long, I forgot that we had a color mode that we could then sample from. So let's edit. I've got my hidden geometries on. That's important because I want to sample this flat part that is being projected. Now I'll turn hidden geometry off, and I should be able to very quickly clean up that bridge. And it already fixed it on that side, the shoulder area, I should say. And I could apply some other textures and whatnot from my model from here. Maybe this is like a little P-rock. Let's do, oh, how about ground cover? There we go. You get the idea. So there you go. The model is progressing from a study model to a schematic design to model, and pretty soon it'll be a design development model. Good luck. Let me know what you think.